I mean, I don't know. I guess we're here. By popular demand, Jennifer Smith and I finally got a show, Snitches. So welcome to our first show.
Who's demanding this? I want to know, like, because that's not right. Like,
All the
no
white
one,
people have demanded that we get together and have a show. Stop playing. Stop playing.
I guess, yeah.
But this is our first show on the PLU Community channel. For those who don't know me, as you should, I'm Angie Hambrick. I'm the Associate Vice President of Diversity, Justice, and Sustainability, and the Interim Director of the Center for Gender Equity.
Do you have enough titles?
Oh, I can't swear. I was going to say I'm the baddest snitch.
Sure,
land,
yeah.
but, you know.
Yeah, snitches get stitches though, remember. So I am Jennifer Smith, or Jen Smith if you want to call me that. I'm Dean of Inclusive Excellence at PLU, and I also teach in the new Gender, Sexuality, and Race Studies program.
Yay.
Woo!
So we're going to spend our Thursdays chatting with each other. We usually, being, physically distanced from Jen has been really hard for me because we literally see each other in real life probably every other day.
Yep.
So it is a time for us to also connect with each other because, we miss each other a little bit.
We do. Oh, look at you. Oh, you're showing some emotion. Oh, sweet.
I have emotions. I feel paid too.
I know you love me, so yeah.
And also time for us to connect with you all and to make sure that we're talking about the issues that are really important to Jen and I, and that we know that are important to some of you out there, and continuing to center the conversation around diversity and inclusion and equity. That is our work and is our lives, and how these things are still impacting us, even though we're not close to each other. So we're going to start.
You're close in my heart, though, if not physically.
Stays in your heart. So let's start with our first. We got segments. With our first segment, what you're doing. And so this time of physical isolation, like we both live with other people, and we're still doing our daily jobs, and we're still trying to figure out kind of just how to live life a little bit differently. So what you been doing, Jen?
I have been baking, not that kind of bacon. It's legal in Washington State, I'm just saying.
That's your life.
That's true. No, I've been baking a lot, which is weird. Part of me thinks that this pandemic is intended to get like women back into this mythical idea of the housewife. But no, I've just been baking shortcakes, lots of banana bread, and stuff like that. Carb loading. So yeah, what you been doing?
Well, what's the thing that you've baked that has been your favorite so far?
I don't know. I really want to bake brownies. I haven't gotten there yet. So what you been doing?
I've been cooking too, and I don't like to cook. I didn't grow up cooking. I grew up with my grandmother, and she was a cook, a professional cook. And then when she retired, she was always cooking. And so I never learned, and I never had a desire to learn either. And so, but now that, I'm a mom, and I guess I'm not now a mom, I've been a mom for like almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years. Hello, September. Yeah. Now I'm mom, like it's a new thing. What? What's this baby?
Almost 3 years. I've had to cook like almost 2 or sometimes 3 meals a day, and I don't care for it. I don't have the creativity that I feel like I should have. So we eat a lot of chicken, which is fine because my son really likes chicken, and a lot of Brussels sprouts. And,
that's good.
Yeah.
No, that's a solid meal. Yeah. I'm not a baker. Like I actually don't like to cook or bake because I get really frustrated really easily. So I don't know, maybe because I'm at a slower pace, I feel like I've got more headspace and more patience to do it. But yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah, Rona got us doing all kind of stuff.
Yep. Exactly.
So what we want to kind of talk about today is we want to center our conversation today around this concept of control and of care, and how do we think about the spheres that we have control over, and how do we care for those spheres, and thinking about our grief and the sense of loss that we have, and how can we use the control that we do have to kind of work through those couple of things. So Jen, do you have any thoughts about kind of thinking about loss and control and care and all those?
Yeah, well, when I think about control, I think about Janet Jackson's Control, which in the background.
That's why I have my little off the shoulder shirt on today. That's for Janet.
Yeah, yeah. And we actually have tickets to the Janet show in August, and this Corona better be gone because we are on the floor and we need to be there. So.
Oh, for real.
So yeah, I do think about that song because I love that song, and it was one of the first things. Well, it was the first cassette tape I ever bought. I know, look it up if you don't know what a cassette tape is. But in all seriousness, one of the things I think about now is how to acknowledge what's happening as a moment of grief. I think sometimes people want to believe that it's just a kind of a thing that's happening and that they don't have the right to grieve what they've lost. But every loss, whether that's small or large, should be acknowledged in some way as part of the process of healing and then finding hope and finding a direction forward. I just listened to a webinar by Dr. Rahuldeep Gill, which I know I shared with you and some other students about, it's called The Struggle is Too Real, and maybe we can provide a link to it on our YouTube page. And he talks about that if there is to be hope, grief has to be acknowledged. And so I'm thinking in particular about our seniors and the grief that they feel over the loss of their senior year, including commencement and capstone, and kind of just connecting with their friends and their faculty members. And I know we were teaching a group of seniors for an alternative spring break class that was canceled. And, you know, their first reaction was anger and then disbelief and so on and so forth. And so you could see them kind of moving through the process of grief. And so, yeah, I think for me, when I think about control in this moment, part of that is just acknowledging what our losses have been, not staying there necessarily, but acknowledging it as part of a process to finding a path forward, not to leave them behind, but to carry them forward as part of that nourishment to think about things differently. Because there really is an opportunity here to grieve opportunities lost, but then really reframe and think about what opportunities are provided by this moment of really deep, significant rupture. So yeah,
Go ahead, friend.
No, I was asking you what you think. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to shout out Dr. Gill again, but he did this Facebook post maybe yesterday or 2 days ago, and he asked folks kind of, what do you miss? What are you feeling a sense of loss about? And a lot of folks, and I think there are a lot of educators on this page, so a lot of folks were talking about, you know, I miss my students. There's a sense of loss there. A traditional classroom. I miss going to church. I miss being around my people in my community. And I chimed in and said, yes, I miss all those things, but I also miss like going to the shop and getting my hair washed. And I miss going to Top of Tacoma for takeout and getting nachos. And I miss like going. So I think allowing yourself as well to miss some of the things that you might think are trivial, but are still really meaningful to you and kind of are a part of kind of what makes you whole and what makes you feel like you're part of your community. Like, it's okay to also miss those things that might seem silly, like, right? Yeah. That in the grand scheme of being in a pandemic, it might not feel right to miss those things, but it's okay to say, I really want somebody to come and wash my hair and just rub it. And I miss that. And like you were saying, like not kind of sitting and wallowing in that, but acknowledging that there's a sense of loss across the board.
Right. Well, and those things are, I mean, they're important because they make us feel human in particular kinds of ways. Like I miss being able to run down and get a cup of coffee. And I know there are places where I can go, but I feel guilty doing that because like my need for an Americano shouldn't trump the health of the person who's providing it for me, but I really freaking miss it. Yeah. But yeah, it's those things that, I mean, when you're talking about having your hair washed, it makes me think of pleasure. Mm-hmm. And those moments of pleasure are really significant and they're meaningful. And again, I'm not sure it's something that is valued necessarily or valued in in a way that's connected to humanity versus pleasure as connected to consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And so even rethinking what we miss and why we miss it is part of thinking about a path forward. And so thinking about pleasure as part of humanness, or a sensation, maybe even if we want to think outside of the human, versus pleasure for consumption or pleasure for performance, which are more within a kind of capitalist frame. So yeah, that's what made me think of when you were talking about the having your hair washed. Yeah.
You made me think of The Pleasure Principle by Janet Jackson.
Okay, yeah, totally.
Song.
Yep.
Janet is
It's
just
all about Janet.
all in this podcast. Let's change the theme. One of the things that you said was that this sense of loss gives us the opportunity to think about how we can do things differently. Yeah. And thinking about like what we have taken for granted as normal, which is not normal. Right. And we'll never
I appreciate the cloth scare quotes. Like,
shout out. So things aren't ever going to be the same. And right. One of the things we're always, Jen and I and some folks at PLU, very often we cite this article by Tima Okun, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly, about white supremacy culture. And one of the things that we've really started to think about is when we're starting to recreate or reestablish what our new normal looks like, how can we create that that is not just embedded in white supremacy or using a anti-white supremacist frame. So thinking about how, as we've been kind of going through this pandemic and this time apart, thinking about how we've really fallen into kind of the either or thinking, individualism, and thinking
work it out. You got it. Yep.
Friend, thinking about ourselves and not about how what we are and how we do our lives kind of impacts the other, and thinking about there's only one right way to do something. And so I think this also gives us an opportunity to kind of dismantle the way that we've always been doing things, and to think about our new normal, and whatever that is, and whatever we want to call it, because normal, we need to trouble that word as well. Yeah. But our new reality, thinking about it from an anti-racist lens. And that's really exciting. And I think we also need to kind of use our sense of loss to be able to engage in that conversation and in that thinking.
Right. Yeah. No, because I think that's an element of control, is that we have an opportunity now to control and reshape what this future looks like post-pandemic. And again, I was on a webinar with some really amazing kind of radical activists talking about the pandemic is simply revealing tragedies that were always occurring. And so white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, ableism, and so on down the line, those things have been around us always. And now there's an opportunity to use this moment when they're really pronounced to think differently, to imagine differently. I've been saying this to some of my students, like gender, sexuality, and race studies, we're built for this. Like, because we see the cracks, we see the seams, and now other people are really starting to see the seams because of what's happening. And so now's the chance for people who are thinking deeply to jump in and take some control about what the future could or might look like. So even in the midst of grief, there is an opportunity to kind of hold on to the things that we could control and think about opportunities for the future. Yeah.
So we've reached our final segment. Jen, you want to talk about what that is?
Honorable and dishonorable mentions. This is a segment that we are stealing from, or maybe borrowing from, this amazing podcast called Fanti, F-A-N-T-I, which you should totally check out. It's this really smart, thoughtful critique of pop culture that we highly recommend. So Angie, let's start with honorable mentions. Who's your honorable mention this week?
My honorable mention is a professor in my PhD program. Her name is Tabitha Jove. Sorry about that. Tabitha asked me on Tuesday if I would be interested in being a part of a research team that is looking at Black women in academia and how we support each other through either PhD programs or through faculty culture, or just how do we support each other. Okay. And she offered me the opportunity with the caveat, I was like, I know you're working on your dissertation.
Yeah, you are.
I'm still working. But this is an opportunity for you to be in community with other Black women, and your voice is really important. So we invite you to be a part of this. And I said, yes, I'm really excited.
Woo, that's awesome.
And she's seen me as a scholar. That's pretty dope. So shout out to Tabitha.
That's fantastic. Woo, good news.
My
honorable mention is Marketing Communications at PLU, who's behind the show. Whoa. And they have been working their behinds off, I want to say something else, since things kind of really got messy, to keep not only the folks at PLU well informed and connected, but also connected to the community as a whole. So yeah, Marcom working on, with fewer people than they probably need, doing lots of awesome, amazing work, and doing it with a smile. So yeah,
it's always positive. Shout out.
Yeah, that's my honorable mention. Now, dishonorable mention. Who's on your list?
I'm from Wisconsin. What? So yesterday, they had a primary election. The governor, some say, asked a little late to postpone the election because Corona. The Supreme Court, Wisconsin Supreme Court said, no, you all will be safe, go to the polls. And people did. However, it was a mess. In Milwaukee County alone, there used to be 180 polling stations, and that went down to 5 for the entire county in Milwaukee. And so my mother and my great aunt and all of my family is still there. And so they were texting me with how long the lines were because folks were still trying to do physical distancing.
Yeah.
There were masks. The machines weren't working in some cases. People who had sent off for absentee ballots never got them, and so had to make the choice either to not vote or stand in line. And so it was an utter mess, and just another, illustration of how this pandemic is also affecting the most marginalized, how it's disenfranchising folks, and so how deep this thing goes. So Wisconsin, come on, get it together.
Come on, Wisconsin, for shame. My dishonorable mention is a little at the micro level. It is for people who do not make space for you on a sidewalk. You're supposed to give people 6 feet of distance, and lots of people are getting out in the back because the sun is out here in Tacoma at least. And so taking walks is good, but you'll see who's going to give space and who's not. And who's not giving space. It's the dudes. Sorry, dudes. Some of y'all feel like you own the sidewalk, and at least that's been my experience, and don't provide 6 feet of space. And so you've got some people who are walking in the grass or in the street to provide space because someone just won't move. So move for each other. One of the things we're learning from the pandemic is that we're all interconnected. Literally, our breath is connected to each other. So yeah. Lean into the interconnectedness, make some space for people on the sidewalk. So, yeah.
All right, y'all. I enjoyed this, Jennifer.
I did too, Angie. Thank you for the invitation.
Yep. Shout out to Leigh Smith for saying that, this is what we need to do. Shout out to our producer, Thomas. All of you for tuning in. We'll be back next week. So see you then.
Yep. Take care. Wash your hands.
Bye.
Just hands.